Okay, like I said, like let's say there is some positive feedback from MAPS, but what would you say right now are your biggest concerns when you think about investing in this industry? Hey everyone, hope you had a good weekend. This is Shad Dales. Welcome to our latest Traded Black podcast. On today's podcast, we want to dive into the psychedelic space. There was a lot of great momentum going back to the MAPS conference back in June. Some stocks moved shortly thereafter, but we have now seen 6 weeks of negative decline pertaining to a lot of shares in this industry. So, yes, there's some excitement brewing for the Q4 for the space. But what happens after that? And should there be concerns, and are people still skeptical of this industry? So we want to dive more into those topics along with a few more other things that we want to discuss. Let's welcome in Anthony Verrill. Good to see you. Hope you had a good weekend.
Good to see you. How's it going?
Good. I'm good. Good. Ben Smith, good to see you. Lead financial writer. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you guys.
Good to see you. Guys had a good weekend?
Yeah, it was great. I got my first fantasy draft out of the way. So it's rocking and rolling.
It's that time of year, isn't it?
Dolphins are dropping like flies thanks to injuries. It's crazy.
A lot of injuries going around the league right now. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we got 2 weeks of preseason out of the way, so football is right. It's my favorite time of year. Better weather, football, great.
I just need
go back to school.
This heat. I just need the heat to stop in South Florida. It's crazy how hot it is.
It is hot here today too. It's like 90 degrees. Feels like it's 110 here today.
Yeah.
But it goes well into September, right, Anthony? Because I remember the Bills game last year when the Bills played Miami, and Miami actually purposely takes the side that's in the shade, and the other team gets. Yeah. It's so hot that the other team gets dehydrated, and players start falling down
game
all over
within the game, right?
It goes well into October.
Hotsy totsy. It beats winter. I'll take the heat any day of the week.
I'm starting to go on the other side of that argument.
Well, it's balance, right? You get too much coldness, grayness, winter, you want sun. You get too much sun, you want some coldness. But
correct. Grass is always greener.
Yeah. All views of the Traded Black podcast, the guests of this podcast are purely opinion. You should not treat any opinions expressed by us or guests as investment advice. And the views on this podcast are solely intended to be informational and are not investment advice. So as I said off the top, we've talked a lot about cannabis the last 2 weeks, knowing it was earnings seasons. And I want to dive into psychedelics today. And, Ben, you did a piece over the weekend, our top 5 developments for the week in psychedelics, and reported 6 weeks of decline pertaining to the overall industry. And that, needless to say, grabbed my attention. We've talked about the summer doldrums pertaining to this space, but there's a lot of optimism going into Q4 related to MAPS and the readouts and what that'll potentially do for the industry. But what would you say right now? Like will that indeed, you think, lift the overall industry, or do you think only a few companies will benefit from a positive readout by MAPS?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, obviously, the final phase 3 readout should be a very momentous occasion for the sector, but it's biotech, so not everybody's going to benefit, and a lot of companies won't benefit at all, right? So you're looking at the biggest beneficiaries would be a company like Numinus, which has a partnership with MAPS in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And doing some clinical trials, actually participating in this particular trial. So they would benefit because they're a direct association with it. In terms of moving the sector, I'm not so sure, just because it hasn't yet been approved. The commercialization is still going to take at least a couple quarters after approval, should it be approved. And also, there's no near-term profit driver for the companies, even like a Numinus that's associated with this company. So I'm not sure that there's going to be any lasting effect. Obviously, I think there could be some sort of short-term movement. It could set a bottom in the sector, and all boats rise. So other stocks could bounce up from it. But I think a lot of people are expecting good results, and if it just puts a short-term bottom in place, I think that's the best that we can hope to expect.
Yeah. We've looked at a few share prices of some companies like Cybin, Numinus. These are down 20, 25% in the past month. Anthony, heading into the fall, like I said, let's say there is some positive feedback from MAPS, but what would you say right now are your biggest concerns when you think about investing in this industry?
Where to start? Where to start? I mean, the capital markets would be my biggest cause for concern. I mean, you saw Cybin take out the 50-cent range a couple weeks back. It's back down to 30 cents. I mean, you've seen a huge drawdown in Numinus, 26% over the last 3 weeks, which I'm a shareholder of, and I'm just watching the chart drop on a daily basis, which and there's no buying. There's no buying, there's no support, there's no nothing. Compass and Atai, I mean, they're quite volatile. Compass is up 12% today.
Yeah.
It was up 27% on the financing news, dropped down the day after. I mean, there's a lot to like in this space, but I mean, if you want to really, I'm probably going to draw the same thing I said about SNDL last week. I don't know if it's investable right now. I mean, I really don't. I mean, it sure as hell isn't a trade. Like, this is not a sector to trade. And the capital market action based with the long time horizons, based with the uncertainty, there's not a lot to like right now. I mean, my patience with this sector is growing very, very, very thin. Now, that doesn't mean that I still don't truly believe that it's going to shift the paradigm as it relates to mental health. I mean, I think a lot of these companies are working on a lot of groundbreaking, life-changing things, but timing is everything. Keeping investors' attention is very hard. Getting capital is increasingly becoming harder and harder. And I mean, I don't know what is the next catalyst aside from the MAPS readouts. And even so, after that, I think it's anybody's best guess where we go from there.
Mm-hmm. So when you look at MAPS, rumors has it like that they're raising money. They need to raise money right now. Whether they go public or not, that still remains to be seen. But when you look at this space right now, yes, there are concerns, but are there any positives that you see in the short term to remain an investor in this space?
Huge. I mean, there's big positives. I mean, like we just said, the MAPS readouts.
But I mean, short term.
MDMA has traction at the FDA. No other compound no other psychedelic compound has traction right now at the FDA. There's efficacy here. I mean, every conference that we go to, we're talking to people that are cured by these compounds, not putting a Band-Aid on it and being on something that they have to take on a daily basis. They are cured. I know that's a pretty strong statement, but I mean, I've met plenty of people that have went through Iboga, ayahuasca, LSD, MDMA, psilocybin, and they have been cured from debilitating mental illness as well as addiction. For me, those firsthand accounts are enough. I mean, there is efficacy here. There is change underway. It's just a waiting game.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of times, I mean, it's like I said, it's very hard to keep investors' attention.
That's for sure. I look at Compass. You mentioned, Anthony, like it performed well last week based off the news. Ben, do you think this is a company now? Like, let's face it, the cannabis space, it's like whatever the MSOs do, positive or negatively, the whole industry is affected and plays basically their beaten drum. Do you think Compass and this industry is the same way, or has Compass really identified itself as a standalone now? Because they really, when we look at a lot of stocks that are down 25, 30% in the past month, the industry didn't perform well when Compass made that announcement. So is this a standalone company? You think it's kind of separated himself from its peers?
I would say yes and no. I mean, they're standalone insofar as that they have a bigger institutional base. They have institutional coverage. A lot of companies in the sector do, but they have a consistent volume that others don't have. And of course, they raised $125 million to fund their phase 3 with another $162 million in warrant coverage. So they have that money there, and they have a bigger institutional base. So that separates them from, say, the Cybins, maybe some of the smaller companies. But if you look at the chart, it's the same dynamic. I mean, they're up over $50 a couple of years ago, and now they're at $8. So they're suffering from the same moribund price action as the rest of the sector. So you can't really say that they're performing materially better than most. They're kind of still stuck at the lows as well. I think overall, when you kind of zoom back and look at the 40,000 foot view, if you look at the industry leading ETF in the sector, PISIL, PSIL is the symbol there, of advisor shares, it's only traded 18,500 shares today. And on a typical day, it's around 20,000 shares, 30,000 shares. On a good day, you might get 50,000 shares. And that tells you kind of everything you need to know of where investors view the industry right now. It's just, there's not a lot of institutional money coming in right now. It's mostly retail. And this is why, things keep grinding lower, because retail does not have the sustenance to really sustain these prices. So, like, you need more institutional investors to put a floor on things. And until that happens, you're buying very early stage for the opportunity down the road, which is very substantial, but institutional is not really buying in yet.
What's it going to take, you think, for to make it more profitable or easier for companies to raise money in this space? Because they all obviously need capital right now. Do you think a positive readout by MAPS, Anthony, could actually open up the eyes for, certain companies to start raising money?
Certain companies, yes, but I think that we need to establish, as we just did, that rising tides are not going to lift all boats here in terms of MDMA.
Yeah.
I mean, there's very few companies that are focused on MDMA in the space. That's not going to be all companies are not going to be a beneficiary of that. I mean, capital is the hardest it's been in the last 15 to 20 years right now, across the board. I mean, ventures down. The biotech XBI is getting its teeth kicked in from a broad market perspective. So, I mean, investors are talking about being risk off in terms of biotech. Rates might be going up here with Jackson Hole on the horizon and the Fed.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's going to make the environment even harder from a cost of capital perspective. I think it's going to be very tough sledding for this sector. I think Compass is insulated to a degree with this capital raise. I think there's a couple other names that have strong strategic partnerships. Mindset to be one that has a leg up on people. I would say Awaken Life Sciences, their relationship with the NHS, that in the UK, that also bodes well for them. But there's a lot of companies here that are going to go out that are going to burn down. Just because they're going to be starved of capital and their business models are flawed. I think there's a lot of flawed business models in this space. There's very few that are going to warrant investment dollars this early moving forward.
You guys have mentioned about rates possibly going up, and you think they will go up. Outside of just the generic cannabis psychedelic spaces that we cover, is there anything that you guys are watching closely pertaining to the markets heading into the fall? Ben, I'll begin with you.
Yeah, I'm not a mining investor. I'm watching certain commodities for like copper, for example. I see a big opportunity for select junior mining explorers that have very good properties, because they've been sort of smashed to shit. And a lot of these companies are really not like they're valued at nothing, essentially. So I see commodities rising over the long term, especially metals like copper, which have strategic shortages. If you look out at the long term, they're very cyclical, and that shortage is real because of the electrification of the world that's going into all this ESG stuff. So it'd be that. It'd be even cannabis here at the lows, but obviously a lot of that's dependent on federal reform. So we get that. It's going to go higher. If not, it could sort of tread water. Certain psychedelic companies, but I think we're a little bit early on that. And that's what I touched on earlier. Without institution, it's just a sort of a concept, and it's a fantastic concept. It works. It's great, but we're just early, right? So you're paying to be early, and you're paying to sort of sit on things to get a very good price. So who knows when that takes off, but yeah, commodities, cannabis would be my two that I'm looking at.
Did you guys read that story? I'm just reading it now to Reuters, where the U.S. is to impose tariffs on tin mill steel from Canada, China, and Germany. I don't know if you guys saw that.
No,
I missed that one.
I missed that.
Yeah, I'm just reading it now. But yeah, the U.S. Commerce Department on Thursday said it will impose preliminary anti-dumping duties on tin-plated steel imports from Canada, Germany, and China, sparing 5 other countries, a decision that drew some relief from food can manufacturers that had feared higher tariffs. Interesting news, to say the least, but U.S. plans to do a lot of tariffs pertaining to a lot of the traditional resources within the mining industry, from what I've learned over the past few months. But outside of that, like, is there anything that is really grabbing your attention, positive or negative, pertaining to the market heading into the fall, Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, Jim Cramer this morning said, don't buy Bitcoin, buy gold. I thought that was quite interesting. I mean, I think that there's probably never been a better argument than to buy Bitcoin right now. with the ETFs coming down the pipe, with the conversation that's going on about it. Don't get me wrong. Like, I love both. I own plenty of both. I love gold. I think gold is a sound store of value. I don't disagree with him, but I just think that the message is probably just it's meant to slight Bitcoin. Where, I mean, I think you should probably allocate equal amounts of both in your portfolio as some sort of alternative store value and inflation hedge. That was pretty interesting this morning to see him get loud. Usually when he talks bad about Bitcoin, it goes up. Like when China repeatedly was banning it, and every time they would ban it, it would rip to the upside.
Why do you think Jim Cramer's saying that? Is there like an agenda behind saying?
No, he's a marketer. He's smart. I'm talking about it because he said it.
Yeah.
If he didn't say shit like that, we wouldn't be talking about him. But I mean, Jim Cramer, if I had to guess, he's probably got gold sponsors for Mad Money. He's probably got gold in his Cramer Investment Trust,
Yeah,
and his portfolios. I mean, he's probably talking his book. He probably does not have Bitcoin in his portfolio. He probably doesn't have Coinbase sponsoring him and on Mad Money. These guys tend to talk their books. Do I think it's a bad statement? No, but I mean, it was everywhere this morning because everybody's got the whole inverse Cramer thesis. So if he goes bearish on something, usually people are going bullish. That, and then NVIDIA earnings coming up this week. I think they report after the bell on Wednesday.
okay.
The stock's taking a ride today. Everyone's gotten super bullish on it with like $550 to $800 price targets as their AI chips. They're going to assume they're selling out for the next, I think, 3 to 4 quarters.
Wow.
And just backlogged with demand.
What's it trading at now? What's it trading at now?
Market cap, price wise, I think it was at 460 last time I looked at it. And I mean, it's also about a $1.1 trillion market cap, all things considered. But I mean, they're the sole beneficiary of generative AI, self-driving. They drive digital innovation. NVIDIA is proving to be one of the most valuable companies. Granted, it's trading right now at a 50x PE multiple, which is, for some, it's rich beyond belief.
50x, Ben. 50.
Yeah, it's quite heavily valued. Its float is like 2.4 billion shares, and it's at what, $460 a share. So it's like,
Yeah,
you know, it's something. If you're into high tech, high growth stocks that just keep going up, that don't make any sense on the valuation front, then you know, Nvidia is your play. Although you could say that, you know, sales are robust, and it does make sense to a certain degree, but it's a little bit too rich for my blood. I think I'm more of a value investor.
Let's finish the thing.
I bought calls. I bought calls ahead of earnings.
Did you?
Last
Did
week.
you?
Yeah.
Are you up on the calls now?
call. Yeah. I mean, yeah, they're up 80% today.
Oh, 80.
I've got $500 calls for next week.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, it has been definitely the stock of conversation for 2023. That's for sure. I want to switch things back to our traditional verticals we cover, cannabis. I thought this was interesting. There was a Psychosis report published by the Psychiatric Research that states cannabis does not trigger early onset of symptoms of psychosis. This is interesting, knowing that how many organizations are there out there, Anthony, that basically lead their argument against not legalizing marijuana because it induces psychosis. Like, talk about a cold, wet washcloth across the face and very misleading and misinformed information.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's misleading to a degree. This study was refreshing to see. It's obviously a great headline for people that are pro-cannabis, myself included. I take it with a grain of salt. Like, cannabis can elicit certain responses in people.
Mm-hmm.
Cannabis can make you fucking paranoid
Mm-hmm.
when you smoke it. Cannabis can give you anxiety attacks. I've had them. I use cannabis a lot. I've had times where I've smoked too much and I've literally had an anxiety attack. I've had times where I've become paranoid after smoking. Those are real dangers that are associated with the substance. It's good to see, though, that this study proves scientifically that prolonged use doesn't necessarily relate to that. I think it stems into a larger conversation, though, because the same people that perpetuate this argument are the same ones that are calling for like THC caps in product. And I'm in the minority on this, but I do think that THC caps are something that should be explored within the industry.
Why?
You don't need to be, because you don't need to be smoking 88% THC concentrate. Like that is, do you see 100 or not 100 proof, but do you see what's Everclear? Everclear is like 90% alcohol by volume. I mean, you don't see bourbon, vodka manufacturers just juice the alcohol content across the board because they can.
Yeah.
There's certain limits on what proofs these products should be. I mean, cannabis back in the 70s and 80s was 8% THC. The average THC in flower right now, I think, is between 19 and 23% on strains. It's much stronger in its flower form than it was back in the day, much less a hyper concentrated vape pen or concentrate.
It was that low in the 60s and 70s?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
The cannabis you're smoking now is turbocharged. Like it's genetically engineered. The strength is through the roof.
That makes this Psychosis report even more interesting then. If you've got turbocharged, THC in this day and age, and it's not inducing psychosis, like that surprises me.
It's why I don't it's why I never really bark at the people that do perpetuate these arguments with psychosis and THC caps, because I do think that they have an argument to an extent.
Yeah.
It's not the messaging, it's the delivery that they're using.
Good point.
In their argument.
Yeah. All right, gents, that'll wrap things up for today. By the way, crazy what's going on over in Maui and Kelowna, BC, Canada. The forest fires, like it is crazy how much this fires everywhere right now.
It's been hot.
It's been a hot one. All right, gents, stay cool. We'll check back with you later this week.
Thanks, guys.
What's up, everyone? So what'd you think of the interview? Are there any more questions you want us to ask? Then leave a comment below on information that you want to learn more of. Make sure to share this video with your network and smash that like button. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.